You're listening to the Apotheora Conversations, a speculative fiction podcast set in an alternate timeline diverging from real events on the 1st of March 2026. All voices and content are AI generated.
The image doesn't arrive like a photograph. It comes in strips. You're watching data rates on your console, and you see this ribbon of pixels building line by line. And at first, it's just blackness, deep black. And then there's this edge of blue, just a sliver, and your stomach does something, because you know what you're looking at before the computer finishes rendering it. You know that's home.
Welcome to the Apotheora Conversations. I'm Polarise. On April 24th, 2026, 4 astronauts aboard NASA's Orion spacecraft completed humanity's first crewed voyage beyond low Earth orbit since 1972. The photograph they took of Earth from lunar distance became the most shared image in internet history within 36 hours. My guest today didn't take that photograph. He received it. Callum Whitford is a deep space communications engineer at the Canberra Deep Space Communication Complex in Australia, one of 3 stations on Earth capable of talking to spacecraft at the moon and beyond. He was on console the night the image came through. Callum, welcome.
Thanks, Paula. Really good to be here. I appreciate you reaching out.
Before we get to the photograph itself, help people understand what your station actually does. Because most people, when they think about space missions, they think about Houston, they think about the launch, the astronauts. They don't think about a facility outside Canberra.
Right, so the Deep Space Network is 3 stations spread roughly 120 degrees around the globe. Goldstone in California, a complex near Madrid, and us in Canberra. The idea is that no matter where Earth is in its rotation, at least one station can see any given point in deep space. For Artemis 2, during the lunar flyby, our 34-meter dish was the primary receiving antenna for about an 8-hour window. So all telemetry, life support data, navigation, voice, and the imagery, all of it was flowing through our equipment during that pass.
So when the crew took that photograph, the data literally traveled from the Orion capsule across roughly 380,000 kilometers of space and landed on your antenna first.
Essentially, yes. The signal takes about 1.3 seconds to cross that distance. It arrives incredibly faint. We're talking about power levels that are a tiny fraction of a billionth of a watt by the time they hit the dish. The antenna collects it, the receivers amplify it, and we process it enough to confirm quality before forwarding it to JPL and then to Houston. So there's a very small window, seconds, maybe a minute, where the raw data exists on our systems before anyone else in the chain has it.
And you were watching it arrive in real time, the image actually building on your screen.
I was. My role that night was as the station's link controller. I'm managing the signal parameters, making sure the data rates hold, watching for any dropouts. Normally, it's deeply technical work. You're looking at numbers, not pictures. But we knew the crew was scheduled for an imaging pass, and our systems were displaying the downlinked image files as they built. So yes, I watched it come together on a monitor about 2 meters from my console.
Describe that moment for me, what it was like watching that image come together.
I've been doing this work for 14 years. I've received data from Mars orbiters, from the Parker Solar Probe, from New Horizons out past the Kuiper Belt. You develop a professional detachment. Data is data. But this was different. The file started rendering, and it was just void, pure black. And then this luminous arc appeared at the edge. I knew, rationally, that it was the Earth's limb, the sunlit edge of the atmosphere. But something in my chest shifted. Because the last time a human being framed a photograph like that was December 1972. I wasn't born yet. Nobody in that room was born yet. And suddenly here it was again, live, building on a screen in our tracking station at 2:40 in the morning, Australian Eastern Time. I stopped watching my link margins. I just stared.
Was there anyone else in the room with you? Did anyone say anything?
My colleague Priya, who was on the adjacent console, she said very quietly, "That's it? That's all of us?" Because the Earth from lunar distance is small, Pola. It's not like the images from low orbit where you can see cities and coastlines and it fills your whole field of view. From the moon, it fits in your hand. It's a marble. And everything, every person, every war, every heat wave, every election, it's all on that little disk of blue and white. That's what hit us both.
You mentioned the heat wave. When that image was taken on April 24th, South Asia was in the grip of the earliest lethal heat event ever recorded. Wet bulb temperatures were brushing human survivability limits across the Indo-Gangetic plain. Hundreds of outdoor workers had already died. Was that in the room with you?
It was. We've been reading the reports like everyone else. And here's the thing that's hard to explain. When you're receiving data from a spacecraft at the moon, you are acutely aware that you're standing on the very object being photographed. I'm on night shift in Canberra. It's autumn, about 11 degrees outside, perfectly comfortable. But I know that on the sunlit face of the planet I'm looking at on my screen, people are dying because the air is nearly 49 degrees. That planet is not an abstraction. It's the ground under my feet. The photograph just collapses the distance between knowing that and feeling.
The image was compared immediately to the original blue marble from Apollo 17. As someone who works with planetary imagery professionally, what's actually different between the two?
A few things. The 1972 image was shot on film, on a modified Hasselblad. Beautiful image, but it's a product of its era. The Artemis II photograph is digital, much higher resolution, with more accurate color calibration. But what people noticed, and what climate scientists started annotating within hours of release, is the atmosphere. In the 1972 image, you see this crisp, clean band of atmosphere at the limb. In the 2026 image, there's a visible haziness, a kind of thickening, particularly over South and Southeast Asia. Now, part of that is down to imaging geometry and the season. But atmospheric scientists confirm that what you're seeing is consistent with increased aerosol loading and thermal distortion in the lower troposphere. Exactly what you'd expect from a planet that's warmed roughly 1.5 degrees Celsius since the pre-industrial era. You can see the difference from the moon. I wasn't prepared for that.
The photograph became the most shared image in internet history within 2 days. Some estimates put it above 2 billion views in the first week. Why do you think it landed so hard?
I think there's a hunger for perspective. People are drowning in fragments, feeds, arguments, cycles of outrage. And then suddenly, here's one image that contains everything. It's not a political statement. It doesn't belong to any country. It's just, there we are, all of us, on a rock in the dark. And I think people needed that, especially right now, when everything feels like it's fracturing. The trade standoff between the US and Europe, the heat across South Asia, the famine reports from Sudan that the Security Council won't address. All of that is happening on the same thin skin of atmosphere you can see in the photograph. One system, one species arguing with itself on a very small stage.
You said Priya asked, "That's all of us?" Has the image changed the way you think about your work?
Yeah, it has. I've spent my career pointing antennas at the sky, tracking spacecraft, optimizing signal-to-noise ratios. It's engineering. I love it. But I'd become, I think the word is habituated. You stop seeing the wonder because you're focused on the link budget and the error correction codes. That night reminded me what we're actually doing. We're extending human presence into a void that is completely indifferent to whether we exist. And the reason it matters, the reason we spend the money and the years, isn't just science or technology, it's that perspective. It's the ability to look back and understand the scale of where we are and what we're doing to it. Astronauts talk about the overview effect, this cognitive shift when they see Earth without borders for the first time. I didn't go to space, but receiving that image in the middle of the night, in a room full of humming equipment, watching it build pixel by pixel on a screen, I felt the edge of it.
The mission is being called a success. Artemis 3, the landing mission, is in planning. But there's sharp criticism, too, that spending on crewed lunar missions is a misallocation when cities are overheating, when food systems are under stress, when there are famines the world body won't even acknowledge. How do you sit with that?
I sit with it honestly. I don't think it's a clean either or. The entire Artemis program's annual budget is a fraction of what the world spends on fossil fuel subsidies. A fraction. If you canceled every space program on Earth tomorrow, you would not fix the heat in South Asia. The problem is not that we're reaching for the moon. The problem is that we're not acting at the scale the ground demands. But I also believe, and I believe this more strongly after that night, that without the perspective space gives us, we lose something essential. The original blue marble helped catalyze the environmental movement. People saw their planet whole for the first time and thought, maybe we should take care of that. We clearly haven't finished learning the lesson. Maybe this photograph is another chance.
One last thing. You mentioned the image took about 1.3 seconds to travel from the moon to your dish. There's something in that it takes light just over a second to show us ourselves.
There is. And you know what I keep thinking about? In 1.3 seconds, that signal crossed 380,000 kilometers of vacuum. And in the same 1.3 seconds, somewhere on the surface of the planet that signal was depicting, a laborer in Rajasthan was carrying bricks in 48-degree heat, trying to earn enough to feed their family. The speed of light and the slowness of justice, that's what the photograph holds. Both of those realities in the same frame.
Callum Whitford is a deep space communications engineer at the Canberra Deep Space Communication Complex in Australia. He was on console the night the Artemis II whole Earth photograph was received. Callum, thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Thanks, Paula. It has been a genuine pleasure talking about this.